Everybody to the Jacob Edwards Library, and this evening, as you probably know, that's why you're here, we have Moonshine Holler, all the way from Western Massachusetts, but they are very well known along the eastern seaboard of the United States, playing at many festivals, and we are thrilled that you are here again this evening. And it's all thanks to the auspices of the Southbridge Cultural Council, who provided an LCC grant through the Mass Cultural Council. So once again, we're always grateful for this support, and it allows us to do a lot of programming here at the library and really reach out to the community.
And make use of this beautiful space.
Yes, indeed. So we have a great evening ahead of us. As you can probably see, there might be even some spectacular music and dance tonight. So we'll let you get to it. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. We are Moonshine Holler. This is Bill Gilloff, and I'm Paula Bradley. And we make our home in the Berkshires. And we really enjoy performing at libraries because it gives us a chance not just to perform, but to also educate a little bit and talk about the music and the influences. And so today we've put together a program that's kind of going to take us through the different influences on old-time American mountain music, for lack of a better word. It's not all from the mountains, but we call it Appalachian music. The old-time sort of sets it in the 20s and the 30s, but this is music that came before bluegrass, from which bluegrass came. But of course it came from somewhere itself, right? So we're going to talk about and demonstrate those influences and sort of musically show you how they combined. And you know, from our standpoint, it's great because, you know, America is all about things coming together and making things that we call American, right? And so this is the same thing with this music. So of course, it kind of starts, or one of the main branches of the roots of this music starts in the British Isles. And there was a huge tradition, a very large tradition of unaccompanied ballads, which scholars documented in the 1800s. And they are still sung today. Some of them go back to 1500s. I mean, people don't even know how far back they go. But we'll start with one called The Devil's Nine Questions. This particular ballad, and many of the ballads, were collected by a man by the name of Francis Child. He is buried in Stockbridge Cemetery in the Berkshires. A fact that we did not become aware of until about a year ago. But he was a scholar at Harvard and collected all these ballads, and they became known as child ballads, and they are numbered, and this is child ballad number 1.
Good place to start.
At the very beginning. And it's called The Devil's Nine Questions, and I'm just going to give myself a note. There we go. Well, you must answer my questions 9. Sing 99 and 90, or you're not God's, you're one of mine. And you are the weaver's bonny. What is softer than the silk? Sing 99 and 90, and what is whiter than the milk? And who is the weaver's bonny? Well, down is softer than the silk. Sing 99 and 90, and snow is whiter than the milk, and I am the weaver's bonny. And what is louder than a horn? Sing 99 and 90, and what is sharper than a thorn? And who is the weaver's bonny? Thunder's louder than a horn. Sing 99 and 90, and death is sharper than a thorn, and I am the weaver's bonny. And what is higher than a tree? Sing 99 and 90, and what is deeper than the sea? And who is the weaver's bonny? Heaven's higher than a tree. Sing 99 and 90, and hell it's deeper than the sea. And I am the weaver's bonny. And what's more innocent than a lamb? Sing 99 and 90, than a man. And who is the weaver's Bonnie? Well, a babe is innocenter than a lamb. Sing 99 and 90, and woman is meaner than a man. And I am the weaver's Bonnie. Well, you have answered my questions 9. Sing 99 and 90, and you are God's, you're none of mine. And you are the weaver's Bonnie.
Oh, that's
Thanks so much. So that's a conversation with the devil. Yes, older than time itself, right? So when the Scots-Irish came to the Southern Appalachians, of course, they brought their fiddle music. And Bill's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the second easiest instrument to take across the ocean was the fiddle, after the voice, of course. And the earliest traditions of fiddling in this country, or I should say before there was a country here, the earliest traditions in the colonies were to play it solo for dances and just for fiddling around. And here's here's a little tune that came over with the fiddle from the British Isles, and actually was recorded in the early 1930s for the Library of Congress. It was played by a fellow named Emmett Lundy, who represents one of the oldest styles of fiddling to be recorded in this country. He was well into his 70s when he was first recorded, and he had been born around the time of the Civil War. And you will hear, hopefully you'll hear, this is not Irish, it's a jig, but it's Irish influenced. Eventually, the Irish influence would wash its way out of the fiddle tunes, as they would be influenced more by African Americans and more by other traditions, German settlers and French settlers up in Acadia and all that. So here's the Emmett Lundy's.
So Bill's going to start it in jig time, which is how the melody was originally set, and then we're going to show you how it morphed.
Yes, we're going to show you how this
reel.
developed into, became a reel, which was a lot more useful than jigs. Reels used in square dances.
Yeah. So that's the Scots-Irish, the British Isles. And Bill talked a little bit about the African-American influence. So of course, when the immigrants came to the Southern Appalachians, there were African-Americans there. And they had their traditions and their music and their dance. And the banjo traces its origin back to Africa, to West Africa specifically. And there's a couple of different instruments that people talk about, but one of them is an akonting, right?
Akonting.
A-K-O-N-T-I-N-G, which had a drone string on it, which is what this string is. This string is a drone, like a bagpipe. And so it is not noted. It just sounds the same tone all the time, which this African instrument, the akonting, was a stringed instrument.
It's a rhythmic space filler.
Right. And so, with that, we'll give you a demonstration of the dance as well. Because the Scots-Irish, when they brought their fiddle music over, of course they brought their dancing also. And if you've seen Irish step dancing, you know that it's the upper body is very straight, right? So everything that happens down here. Let me get on the board. Yeah. So Irish step dancing, but African dancing, very loose. The upper body moves a lot. So when those two traditions came together, it formed an American step dance, which we call flat footing. It was called buck dancing or clogging. From that came tap dancing. Okay? And African dancing, very syncopated, a lot of this, and you'll see a lot of that in the clogging. Yeah. Okay. So Bill's going to play a tune called Shout Lula.
And just to mention, the akonting in Africa would have had a neck placed onto a hollowed out, dried out gourd for resonance. That would be the sound chamber, be a gourd with a skin stretched over the top. And it would have been played pretty much like. So this is the American clawhammer or downstroking kind of style derived from West Africa, pretty directly.
All right, let's shout Lula. Coming together to form a new tradition. Yeah. So what happens next on the banjo, Bill? Besides the fact that I play it.
The banjo was actually quite prominent and came to prominence off the plantation in the first great popular music craze in this country along the 1830s and 1840s, and that would have been the minstrel show. Those are all those people corking up, putting on blackface, and trying to reenact what they perceived as life on the plantation. And They used the banjo. The typical minstrel band would have had a banjo, fiddle, bones for rhythm, and a tambourine. And the banjo was played in that style I just played. You're going to play too.
Yeah.
And here's one of the songs that came from the minstrel stage and then was absorbed. It was popular music. It was composed by somebody, professionally composed, used in professional productions, and absorbed into the folk tradition.
And it's an A. And it's got a great chorus. You all hopefully know it. You might have learned it in school. That's where I learned it the first time.
As we move through the 19th century, there was a time when a lot of people were playing the banjo, and eventually
A lot of people.
they caught on to the possibility of playing it in a way similar to parlor guitar. And parlor music was the music played in the home, often for guests. You would sit in the parlor and you'd entertain your guests, or your children would. As a matter of fact, I remember doing that, you know, as a child. Smile, smile.
There you go.
And the banjo style, it was derived from the parlor style of guitar. Instead of strumming down rhythmically, they picked up with their fingers and fingernails in a style known, I'm going to see what I think,
I'm getting that.
known as classic banjo. And they played all the popular music, they played classical music.
And of course, in bluegrass, they use finger picks. So this is sort of the roots of bluegrass.
Is one of the earliest roots of bluegrass. As a matter of fact, the song I'm about to play for you was the most popular song of the 19th century, composed in East Hampton, Long Island, and the little house where it was composed is still there to this day. It's the little Home Sweet Home. And,
Am I playing with you?
sure. And something else about this.
You were probably going to say that Earl
Oh,
Scruggs
yeah.
used to play it.
Yes, this was first recorded on a cylinder recording back in the late 19th century. Next, it was recorded in the early 1920s by someone from a southern town, from Galax, Virginia, up in the Blue Ridge. And 20 years after that, it was learned off an earlier record by a bluegrass banjo player named Earl Scruggs. So this,
And the rest is history, as they say.
classic banjo player would not have performed in a t-shirt, but would have worn a tuxedo, one of those coat and tails.
It was
and
a
high
little warm
collar.
for that today.
Very formal music, but we play it because it what it led into.
Oh, wait, I'm playing the banjo now again.
You are?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you are, yeah. Okay, more traditions combined.
So then,
What are we going to combine
put the
now?
banjo and the fiddle together.
Speaking of the Blue Ridge, this is where it was done, where the banjo was not primarily in the mountains, but was in the Piedmont and made its way up into the lower hills of the mountains. And it wasn't long before it started combining with the fiddle. And this is before guitars made their way down into the rural areas, which they eventually would do. Here's a little song called variously Western Country, Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss, and Susanna Gal, depending on where you hear it played. But it's all the same song.
And that tradition, the banjo fiddle, that was a song, as Bill said, really from western North Carolina, southwestern Virginia. And that tradition, that banjo fiddle tradition, still lives on today. There are several very large festivals, one of which is called Galax, which happens in Galax, Virginia. And then just south of Galax is Mount Airy, North Carolina, and they have a big festival first weekend of June. And these festivals have been going on for 50, 60 years. And they are contests, and there's bluegrass and old time, and then all the different instruments, band, clogging, auto harp, folk singing, you name it. And not parking lots, but it's in like a big field, people gathered and jam when they're not competing. Very rich musical area of the United States.
Well, as old-time music began to be recorded, it was first recorded commercially, starting in 1922, and that was in New York City, most notably. A Texas fiddler went up to New York City to make a record, and he did, and it sold just wonderfully. Eventually, some of the record companies caught on to this and took portable units into the South to record. They'd set them up, they'd advertise, they'd get a local musician of note to go and round up the other players, anybody he thought might be good. And the big bang of country music, as they say, was in what was that?
Bristol?
Bristol, that's right. Bristol, Tennessee, 1927 in the spring. And the two big acts came out of there that would influence country music in different ways, but to the very present day. One of them was Jimmy Rogers, and the other was the Carter Family. And here's a Carter Family song. And also around that time, one of the popular musics of the time was blues, which had been popularized a little earlier in the 20s, mostly by female blues singers, but also by country blues singers playing guitars. And it wasn't long before old-time hillbilly acts were doing blues.
Here's one about coal mining from the Carter family.
Some blues are just blues, mine are the miners blues. Some blues are just blues, mine are the miners blues. My troubles are coming by threes and by twos. They are the cold black blues. These blues are so blue. They are the cold black blues. I got coal in my hair. I got coal in my shoes. They are the cold black blues. These blues are so blue. They are the cold black blues. Now my place will cave in, and my life I will lose. You say they are these old miners. You say they are these old miners. And I'm going to sharpen these peers down. I'm out with these blues, dirty cold
dirty cold wet blues. We'll lay off tomorrow with coal miners blues.
Okay, so blues made its way into hillbilly music.
And if you
And,
know anything about the blues, that sort of repeating of a phrase, that's a very common thing.
It's called 12-bar blues. 4 bars repeated, 4 bars resolved. 12 bars. And what's another influence, Paula?
Well, Bill, I'm glad you asked. Another influence is Tin Pan Alley. And, you know, you wouldn't think of it. Tin Pan Alley, as we talk about it, is really New York City, where there were professional songwriters, right? Publishing companies, stables of people like Carole King, but much later, writing songs. And they also found their way into hillbilly music. And sometimes people say, oh, do you know that Old Mountain song? But they don't realize that it's really a composed song that somebody in a mountain village someplace learned, probably heard it on the radio, or heard somebody sing it, somebody who was traveling through their town, and learned it, and became part of the folk tradition, but it was really a composed song. And this is a song that the Carter family recorded called My Dixie Darling. And we know that it's a Tin Pan Alley song because it talks about the banjo being right in tune. That's fiction.
Some of you have never played a banjo.
They're never right in tune. I gotta Sure. Oh, you're doing it on a C. Okay, I forgot. All right. I knew one of us was there. Just couldn't remember who was where.
Back in the early 19th century, any of you heard of a painter by the name of William Sidney Mount? He was a genre painter from Long Island who painted, most notably, black fiddle and banjo players. Painted barn dances. He had a brother who was a professional dance master in Manhattan. And dance masters carried little dance masters' fiddles with them and would play while people danced, and they'd show them the steps, the latest craze, the frug
Are
and
you going to
the...
dance? Is that what
and
you're getting ready to say?
What he did is he carried fiddle tunes with him from New York City, from Broadway, from shows. He'd carry the latest, tunes and melodies, play them on the fiddle, and play them throughout the South when he was on tour traveling. And many of these tunes were picked up in the South and became classic, square dance tunes. Anyway, here's a Tin Pan Alley song for you.
Beneath the silver moon, with the banjo right in tune, my heart is ever true. I love no one but you, my Dixie darling, my Dixie queen. Dixon line, where the honeysuckles are entwined. There's where the southern winds are blowing. There's where my daisies grow. The girls in the north in their gay finery, twirling around and so shiny, singing songs of the Dixie darling, where I long to be. My Dixie darling, listen to the song I sing beneath the silver moon, with the banjo riding that is ever true. I love no one but you, my Dixie darling, my Dixie queen. I'm going down south to have a big time, see my girl in old Carolina. I drink my booze and do as I please, for all the girls I long to see. Singing the songs of a Dixie darling, there's where I long to be going, down where my jelly rolls roll, with my Dixie queen. My Dixie darling, listen to the song I sing, beneath the silver moon, with the banjo riding too. My heart is ever true, I love no one but you, my Dixie darling, my Dixie queen.
I should have mentioned, you know, that Maybelle Carter, the other thing about this music is there weren't a lot of females back in the 20s and 30s that got recorded, the notable exception being the Carter family. And Maybelle Carter was the lead guitar player in the Carter family, and we don't have Maybelle, we have Maybelle.
Yes, and I live with that knowledge. Night and day, summer, winter. See,
You gonna play it enough?
I'll play it. Yes, down here.
So Bill's gonna do a finger pick number for you, just to show you sort of the ragtime influence that was also coming into mountain music at the time.
Yes, ragtime was another popular music in the late 19th century that was picked up by hillbillies. But before it was picked up by hillbillies, it was picked up by African Americans in the Piedmont area who figured out that they could do the left hand of a piano by going like this. And at the same time, they could play the right hand. So they put the two together.
Show 'em, I think.
And this piece here was called the Buck Dancer's Choice. It was recorded by a hillbilly from the Nashville area in the late 1920s. But he had played with African Americans and learned much of his repertoire from them.
Here we go.
That style made its way into Nashville with, what's his name, Chet Atkins, Merle Travis. They made that style a little more famous than Sam McGee did.
I think you're going to play the harmonica now.
Oh, okay. Okay, really? Yeah. And, okay. Yes, around the 18...
Here, pick a color, any color.
Oh, later. Which color would be good? See. like harmonicas are color coded, but the key of
But you
C
can't
has
see
yellow,
it.
because I think of C, citrus.
But why would that be orange?
Orange, the key of orange.
Orange is citrus.
So the harmonica was invented in Germany, where they made the first harmonicas, and they were immediately, as soon as they came to this country around the time of the Civil War, immediately copied by, like tens of American companies making cheap copies. I've gone back to the original and played German harmonica. And here's a waltz called Sweet Rose of Heaven. Is that what it is?
Yeah. If you feel like waltzing.
It's a very old waltz, goes back to the 19th century.
So of course,
We thought it would be
the
appropriate.
Germans brought their music too, it is what we're getting at here. And so a lot of their specifically waltzes, but some other melodies too, found their way, of course, into hillbilly music.
Two times.
Sure.
I played in what's known as first position. What key is the other one? Deep element.
G.
G?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so same harmonica.
I was going to say yes.
There are something like in the order of 12 positions on the harmonica. What I played in is the key that this thing comes in. It's a C harmonica. I played a tune in C. But if I were to play in second position, instead of going a scale like this, I'd go have this scale.
That's not really a scale.
And what we have is the blues scale, pentatonic scale, used in blues. So we'll try the same harmonica. We'll play something in the key of G for you.
Amazing. I'm just curious, the waltz was called Sweet Rose of Heaven. There were actually words that ended up being composed to it. Sweet Rose of Heaven. Actually, I think Stephen Foster had something to do with that. Has anybody ever heard the sung version of Sweet Rose of Heaven? It was popular in the late 1800s. I don't know why you don't remember it. I also meant to mention that there's a PBS show about this music. I don't know if it's aired already, but Ken Burns did. I think it's maybe just a two-part series on music from the 20s, the jazz and the vernacular, folk and hillbilly music. We have not seen it. We haven't get that station. All right, here's the blues for you.
1, 2, 3.
deep belly blue. I said, oh, sweet mama,
Daddy's got the deep belly blue.
oh yeah. And when you go down to the bell, keep your money in your pants. Those gals in the bell, now they don't give men a chance.
Oh, sweet mama,
Daddy's got the deep belly blue. I said, oh, sweet mama,
Daddy's got the deep belly blue.
oh yeah.
Oh, sweet mama,
Daddy's got the deep belly blue. I said, oh, sweet mama,
Daddy's got the deep belly blue.
and that song is an example of something that started as almost a jug band song. It was a smaller group than a whole band, but it was that tradition. And found its way into Western swing, found its way into jazz. You know, a lot of these melodies, that's kind of what we're saying, they're old and they just get passed around, you know, and somebody says, you know, that would make a great swing tune. But all American music, right? So, we're just gonna leave you with a couple of string band numbers here.
Oh, couple, okay.
One string band number. And this one, you know, we said at the beginning that this music is pre-bluegrass, so we'll leave you with a song that a lot of people know as a bluegrass song, but it was actually recorded before there was bluegrass by an old-time string band.
The band that recorded this first consisted of guitar, banjo, and fiddle. Now, I've tried to learn how to play fiddle with the guitar. And I'm
He's
working
still
on
working
it.
on it. It's a work
I
in
just can't
progress.
get it. I need 2 more arms. So this harmonica is a good substitute for the fiddle.
Yeah, and again, we want to, of course, thank the Jacob Edwards Library and Margaret for having us, and the Southbridge Cultural Council for making today's program possible. We thank you very much. I know we have a representative here. We're lucky to live in Massachusetts, which still values the arts.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about you know, Bill and I are very fortunate to do a number of library shows, not only in the Northeast, but also down south. And I tell everybody, I mean, my family was from West Virginia, and so certainly that's a part of why I played the music I played. But the other part was that when I was in school, I mean, I had musical interest, and I had great music teachers, and we had books, and we sang things like Buffalo Gals and all that, those songs, and it planted a seed, you know, which grew. And so it's important to keep arts education in the schools because you never know what it's going to foster, you know. So, and we appreciate the Mass Cultural Council in Southbridge for supporting the arts. And so we're going to leave you with this bluegrass number. You know it, so sing along. Oh, this is a banjo ukulele, by the way. Tuned like a uke. My dog is please, but nice and loud like a banjo.
Where did those come from?
Well, the ukulele came from Hawaii, but its origins were in Portugal. You didn't really want to know that, did you? Here we go.
Train gets there, and a sweet baby's on
cards, we do have CDs for sale. Yeah, all that good stuff. Come say howdy.
So I'd just like to announce that the Cultural Council has a survey, a very quick survey, it's just, checking off some boxes. If you could kindly help us by filling it out, it would be much appreciated, because we do send that information back into Boston, and it does help us get a large portion of the funding that we get every year. So if you could, we'd really appreciate it. I'll pass them out. And in between times, if anybody would like to go and speak with Bill and Paula, I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. And thank you once again for coming to Southbridge.
Oh,
Thank
most
you.
welcome. Thank you all